The hunting lodge stood as a solitary figure in the vast wilderness, an isolated refuge nestled deep within an ancient forest. The weathered structure bore the marks of countless seasons, its wooden frame groaning under the weight of snow in the winter and creaking in the heat of the summer sun. Tonight, under a moonless sky, it seemed to breathe with the wind, as if alive and waiting. 4 men, seasoned hunters all, gathered inside. They had come for the promise of game, lured by tales of the rich, untamed forest. Their host, an old acquaintance, had spoken of deer as numerous as the stars and game trails older than memory. The hunters had heard whispers of something else too, something they dismissed with laughter and bravado around the fireplace. Tom, the eldest, was a grizzled veteran of the wilds. His steel-gray hair and lined face spoke of decades spent stalking prey. Jack, his younger brother, was a burly man with a booming laugh, more at home in a bar fight than the quiet woods. Alex, their friend, was the intellectual, a college professor who hunted to escape the confines of academia. Last was Neil, the newcomer, a city boy looking to prove himself. As the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, Tom spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "You all heard the story, right? The beast of the forest?" Neil chuckled nervously. "Just campfire tales, right?" Tom's eyes glinted in the firelight. "Maybe, but every legend starts somewhere." The first sign of trouble came the next morning. Neil, eager to impress, had risen early to scout the area. When the others awoke, he was gone. They found his tracks leading into the forest, but there was no sign of him returning. As the hours passed, worry gnawed at them. "Maybe he got lost," Jack suggested, though doubt tinged his voice. Alex shook his head. "Neil's not stupid. He knows the basics." Tom's jaw tightened. "We split up, searched the area. He can't have gone far." The forest was a labyrinth of towering trees and dense underbrush. The hunters moved cautiously, their rifles at the ready. The deeper they went, the more the sense of being watched grew. Shadows seemed to shift and move just out of sight, and usual forest sounds were conspicuously absent. Jack was the first to find something, a patch of ground, churned and bloodied. His stomach turned as he called out to the others. They converged on the spot, staring at the gruesome scene. Bits of clothing, torn and stained, lay scattered around. Tom picked up a piece, recognizing it as part of Neil's jacket. "What the hell did this?" Alex whispered, his face pale. Tom's eyes scanned the forest, every sense on high alert. Something big, something strong. They continued their search, now with a sense of dread. The forest felt increasingly hostile, every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig setting their nerves on edge. As dusk approached, they decided to head back to the lodge, hoping Neil had somehow found his way there. But the lodge was empty and the fire they had left smoldering was cold. Night fell, bringing with it an oppressive darkness. The hunters secured the lodge as best they could, barricading windows and doors. They took turns keeping watch, but sleep was elusive. It was during Jack's watch that the first attack came. A thunderous crash against the door jolted them all awake. Jack fired his rifle, the deafening blast echoing in the confined space. For a moment, silence reigned. Then came the sound of splintering wood. Tom grabbed his rifle, his face set in grim determination. Upstairs, now. They scrambled up the narrow staircase, the floorboards creaking under their weight. In the small attic, they huddled together, listening to the destruction below. The beast, whatever it was, tore through the lodge with a fury, snarls and growls filling the air. "It's trying to get in," Alex said, his voice trembling. Jack shook his head. "No, it's trying to get us." The attacks continued throughout the night, the beast relentlessly assaulting the lodge. By dawn, the building was barely standing, its walls and doors shattered. The hunters, exhausted and terrified, made a desperate plan. They would head for the river a few miles to the west. If they could reach it, they might escape. They set out at first light, moving quickly but cautiously. The forest, now bathed in an eerie morning light, seemed to press in on them. They could feel the beast's presence, always just out of sight, always watching. The river was close when the beast struck again. It came from the shadows, a blur of fur and teeth. Jack was the first to fall, his screams cut short by a terrible crunch. The others fired wildly, but the beast was too fast, too powerful. Tom shouted for them to run, and they obeyed, hearts pounding with fear. They broke through the trees, the river in sight. But the beast was relentless. It caught Alex next, dragging him into the underbrush with horrifying speed. Tom and Neil reached the riverbank, breathless and panicked. They could hear Alex's screams, then nothing. The water roared in front of them, a barrier and a hope. "We have to swim," Tom said, his voice hoarse. Neil nodded, too scared to speak. They plunged into the icy water, the current pulling them downstream. The beast followed, its snarls echoing over the rush of the river. For a moment, it seemed they might escape. But the beast was not deterred by the water. It leaped in, powerful strokes bringing it closer. Tom turned, firing his rifle in a desperate last stand. The bullets hit home, and the beast roared in pain, but it did not stop. It reached Tom first, dragging him under. Neil swam harder, his limbs burning, his lungs on fire. The river carried him away, the beast's roars fading into the distance. He crawled onto the opposite bank, collapsing in exhaustion. He lay there for hours, the events replaying in his mind. When he finally gathered the strength to move, he looked back across the river. The forest stood silent, hiding its secrets. Neil was the only one to return to civilization, his tale one of horror and survival. But he knew the beast was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next prey. And as the years passed, the legend grew. Hunters spoke of the beasts of the forest in hushed tones, warning those who dared to venture too deep. Some dismissed it as just another campfire story. But Neil knew better. He had seen the beast, felt its breath, heard its roar, and he knew that some legends were real.